Welcome to the PROUST Questionnaire.
35 questions giving us insight into what makes creative people tick.
Okay, Amitafu.
Hi.
That is the greeting from the Shaolin Temple where I met Sophia Chang.
The baddest bitch in the room.
That's right.
You've known her for a long time. Tell us about Sophia Chang. Tell us about the dojo. Tell us what we're about to hear on this interview.
A really incredibly impressive and empathic person. So Sophia was the manager for the RZA and for several other musicians in the Wu Tang Clan. Mm-hmm. D'Angelo, she's managed sort of hip-hop and rhythm and blues musicians. Mm-hmm. As a Canadian woman of Asian descent, she's Canadian-Korean. And so she works in a world, she lives in a world where she is really someone who's not expected to be there.
Right.
And she made her place. She claims her space. And I met her training at a Shaolin temple downtown with Shifu Shi Yanming, who is the father of her children, and was always incredibly impressed by her seriousness that is sort of, in a strange way, truly compassionate. She's present to be with you.
Yeah.
And I actually think the beginning of this interview is really interesting, how she becomes so present so readily. Yeah. In this conversation.
Yeah. That, I mean, as is so often the case when we talk to these amazing people, I left the interview thinking about all the things I need to do better, about just the way I think about the world, and her ability to be present in the present moment. And as you say, to kind of combine real toughness with real compassion and open-heartedness is, I think, rare and incredibly appealing.
Right.
And yeah, Baddest Bitch in the Room is also the title of her memoir, which is fantastic. It's fun that we get these very accomplished people who do other things, but many of them also write really well. And what a great memoir.
And it's a beautiful book of the path of somebody who comes from a background where what she was doing ultimately was circumscribed by her parents' expectations, but she surpassed that in a really creative way.
Great. No, this is one of our great interviews.
Beautiful.
It's really fun to hear.
So, Sophia, it is such a joy to see you and have you on our podcast, The PROUST Questionnaire, today. Welcome.
Vielen Dank, Herr Baer. I love hanging out with Uli because I can exercise my really limited German.
We're done with the German now, right? That was it.
Yeah, that's
3 more words, I think.
There might be a little bit more. Something might squeeze out of the gray matter, but I think we're done. But thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay. So Carol and I are here. We're going to ask you the questions that Proust asked the first time, and Caroline doesn't know. Maybe she knows this. Oh, she does know this about you. You majored in French.
I did.
In college. So Proust is dear to you, and you gave all that up for hip-hop. So we're going to get back to Proust.
I did. We can get back to Proust, and I remember virtually nothing. Although I wrote one of my greatest essays about him. I don't remember anything about it, though.
It happens.
Yeah.
But I feel like Proust in this day and age would have approved of the choice of hip-hop over Proust.
I agree.
So, yes.
So the first question is, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
This. I mean, Uli, you trained with me. You know, we Shaolin Kung Fu and Chan Buddhism. And so the notion of describing what my perfect happiness is, honestly, it doesn't really resonate with me because I can only think about this right now. And I'm really, really happy right now because it's all about being present. Mm-hmm. But if I expand on that, of course, it's all going to be all about my children's happiness.
Okay. Next question is, what is your greatest fear?
I'm almost afraid to say it, but I think any parent's greatest fear is something terrible befalling their children.
Knocking on wood.
Knocking on wood.
Right.
It's, it's an abject, primal, visceral fear.
What is the trait you most deplore in yourself?
I don't deplore anything about myself. You should probably do that again.
Sorry. Do you want me to do that again? Okay,
No, it's good.
My bad. Well, and you may have the same answer for this question, and it's definitely very non-Buddhist. What is the trait you most deplore in others?
Okay, so I can tell you the things that I don't like about others. Deplore is such a strong word for me. Like, I never use the word hate. It takes a lot for me to use a word like hate, deplore, what I find abominable. But What I do despise in people is a lack of empathy. And a lack of empathy, an extension of that is, and we see this play out every day. A lack of empathy, to me, is inextricably tied to an inability to see others as human.
Yeah.
If you don't empathize with someone, you rob them of their humanity. And I think that's a profound crime against anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you remember this from your French literary studies, but Rousseau, in one of his sort of pseudo-anthropological essays about primitive man, and he uses those terms, says that the distinguishing feature of primitive man relative to the animals or the plants or any other being is the capacity, in fact, for empathy, for compassion. So that's, as unpopular as Rousseau may be as an anthropologist today, there are a lot of problems. I
didn't know that.
Really
He's
nice
unpopular
thought.
as an anthropologist?
I think so, because it's not really evidence-based. He was a novelist and a philosopher, and so he wrote a kind of a natural history of the world and of evolution as he imagined it to have taken place. But there are those moments that are really, really great in what he wrote.
Oh, what? And have people don't study the social contract anymore?
They do. If they're taking my class, they do. And that, I think, is political theory. He's a little more still appreciated.
I see. So it's existing in two different disciplines.
Yeah.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're remembering all the Rousseau you had to read, you weren't reading someone completely discredited. But
right. Okay, good.
That is the one piece of that essay that I really love, is this idea of
yes,
what makes us human.
I have to go look for that.
Yeah. Oh, I'll send you
please do
a reference. Which living person do you most admire?
Me. I mean, that's not to say that I think I am the greatest living human, but I am the person that I admire the most. And that is tied directly to my parents. I can't talk about myself. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Uli, you listened to my memoir. I say in my memoir that it took a motherfucking village to raise Sophia Chang. So in saying that I admire myself more than anybody else, I cannot say that without acknowledging the people who helped create me and bring me here. I'm not sitting before you saying I am self-made, self-taught, that somehow I'm some autodidact and I pulled myself up on my bootstraps and gosh darn it, I just did, right. I just made it. But I love myself. I honor myself. I value myself. And I think, the title of my memoir is The Baddest Bitch in the Room.
Best title I've come across, really, possibly ever.
And I like that you say it's your parents, which is deeply moving, but then there's other families you've lived in.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's my parents, it's my brother, Sophia Chang, whom I always say is the 10 smartest people I know. He's a tenured English professor at Vassar, and he gets quoted throughout the memoir, quotes himself throughout the memoir. Of course, it's my children. And then I have an astonishing, what I call, alliteratively, I call it my carefully curated coterie of consiglieri. So I have amazing friends, and I think that, and Uli knows this, at both my 40th and my 50th birthdays, I went around the room toasting my friends. And at my 50th, they decided that they were going to toast me as well. And what many of them said was, I cannot believe the astonishing array of people at this table. Mm-hmm. So what do they all have in common besides our friendship and our love is that they are brilliant, and they are passionate, and they are empathetic, and they are kind, and they are just, and they believe in something greater than themselves and believe in fighting for something greater than themselves. And, that it could be whether it's a writer or whether it's a computational biologist, whether it's a professor, whether it's a journalist. There are just so many people, and I've worked very, very, very hard over the decades. As a French major, il faut cultiver son jardin.
Oui, tout à fait. Yeah.
Right? And I don't actually know, I looked it up, I don't actually know if that's what Candide meant, but that's what Voltaire meant, but that's how I take it.
Yeah.
Il faut que je cultive mon jardin.
Yeah.
And to cultivate, and my garden is my family. And then, of course, then there's Wu Tang Clan. I say, my name is Sophia Chang, and I was raised by Wu Tang, and their significance in my story is profound.
Sophia, what is your greatest extravagance?
My greatest extravagance would be shoes and clothing. But I want to interrogate extravagance a little bit too, because I think extravagance implies that surely it's something that we don't necessarily need, right? So we're not talking about a necessity, and I get that. But I push back on the notion that it's not something we should do, or rather something we should feel guilty about. Right? And I know that you're not necessarily inferring that, Uli, but I think that others.
It's implied, I think.
I think it's implied.
And so for me, I work my ass off. So if I want to spend $750 on a pair of shoes, I'm going to do it, and I don't feel one iota of guilt, because I'm still keeping everything else in balance. Mm-hmm. I was raised by immigrant parents. My mother escaped from North Korea at 14. My father, you know his harrowing story of escaping, being conscripted by the Korean Army as well. And, I think this is the experience for many first-gen immigrants, and that is that you watch your parents sacrifice virtually everything for you. And I'll never forget, he said to me, Sophia, don't you ever get tired of watching mom subjugate every one of her needs and desires for us? And again, I think that pretty much every Asian immigrant that I've spoken to, child of immigrant, they all have the same experience. But I am a different generation. I'm a bridge generation. And so I will do stuff like get a massage, pay to upgrade to business class. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mother will never, ever do something like that. Yeah. And here I separate myself from my mother. We all buy our, at a certain point, we get to the point where we can buy our parents nice things. So, we bought my mother a cashmere sweater, and it just lives in mothballs. I don't do that, right? I'm going to wear my cashmere until I wear holes in it. But this is it's a very different ethos. And neither one is right nor wrong. It's hardly an indictment of my mother. That's how the fuck she was raised. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I'm going to say the thing that I indulge in, that I need the least, then it is certainly clothes and shoes. But I absolutely resist the notion of any sort of judgment that I should feel guilty about it or shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Wear the cashmere, buy the shoes.
Absolutely.
What is your current state of mind?
Bliss. Always.
What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
I don't know if people call this a virtue, but being non-judgmental.
Oh, all right.
I think that's such bullshit when people say, "Oh, I'm not judging." You're fucking judging. This is how we exist within a society.
So all of this, it is what it is.
Right.
It sounds fake already as a statement.
Right. I hate that saying. That's actually, I can't stand it. It is the most say nothing, do nothing. Right. The notion that we don't judge is preposterous. You have to judge. We teach our children how to judge between what is right and what is wrong, what is strong and what is weak. So if I see somebody behaving in a certain way, yes, I am judging you. You're being a fucking prick, right? Because I almost feel like saying I'm not judging. It's almost an abdication of responsibility. Mm-hmm. Because this is how we engage. So I think that's just. I think it's a bullshit.
I think it's also a weird sentence that people say, I don't judge, meaning, oh, I won't judge you, please don't judge me. And then I think, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Why don't you judge yourself, actually? Why don't you actually think about what you're doing right or wrong? Because it sort of says, please don't judge me.
Right.
But maybe you should put yourself to that and say, I'm going to judge my own behavior here.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And also, we all went through, we all were in academia for a spell, and it's critical thinking.
Right.
Right.
And critical thinking necessarily involves judgment.
That's right. You don't get a pass. And I mean, this is what drives at least me crazy with my students when they say something like, well, I really feel like in this poem, like, show me how, show me where, you're making a judgment. But
Right.
But hearing you talk also kind of, and I would have never put these two things together before, makes me wonder if there isn't a case to be made for an interrelationship between judgment and empathy, right? That
Sure.
if you're holding yourself back from humanity, or you're claiming for yourself a special place
Right.
above judgment,
Right.
then you're not in relation to the rest of humanity.
Well, you're
the
not
way you need to
engaging.
be. Right.
It's part of how we engage. Look,
Yeah.
I would say something like let's say that my girlfriend says, or a boyfriend, a male friend says, I'm having an affair. I'd say, okay, I'm not judging you for that. And I'm not.
Right.
Unless you're hurting somebody, right? But as this kind of blanket, there's almost a condescension and an arrogance to it.
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
You said that,
I
right.
don't judge. Yes, you fucking do.
Yeah. At least own up to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, this is me. On what occasion do you lie?
On what occasion do I lie? I don't know. I mean, I think it's part of. Uli knows me, and Uli has now listened to 7.5 hours of me. I think what people appreciate about me is that I'm very, very frank about the good, about the bad, about my strengths, about my frailties. So I don't really, and I'm not saying I don't lie, I do, I just can't think of it right now.
Yeah.
You know, when I've done public speaking, and particularly when I go to academic institutions, people come up to me, and this is the weirdest thing, you guys. They will say to me, students will come up to me and they'll say, oh my God, thank you for being so honest.
Right.
And I think, who the fuck is speaking here? And they're like, you have no idea who the administration brings in to speak, and they don't feel like they're getting honesty. And I just don't understand. What's the point of writing a memoir if you're not going to be honest?
I think what they mean also is that your work, so in your memoir and in your daily life, you connect being yourself with how you think and act. And this connection is, people can be honest and people can be themselves, but they have very little to say. You have something to say, and you make that connection between you. When you come to university and in your book, you want to also share your knowledge, your experience, and teach something.
Gotcha.
But that's connected to you.
Understood.
I think this connection is what they mean.
Interesting.
The other people are not lying or false, but it's not connected to who they are.
Understood. And they might not be presenting
It's
it as such.
abstract
Yeah.
knowledge.
Right.
It's something they
Yeah.
studied and understood and rehearsed, and they have all sorts of knowledge, but it doesn't connect to life.
Yeah.
Or to their life.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's why we need people like you coming to speak in academia, because I think it's true that generally all of us are trained to take a position of detachment from whatever knowledge we're supposed to be imparting. And I can see how that would feel dishonest or false to people who are looking for
Right.
something more.
But I want to give you a good example. So when I interviewed Caroline on my other podcast about Proust, you said something very, very personal of why you reread Proust later in life.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
very personal and very poignant. And that connection, why someone would spend so much time studying an author. You could study many authors. They're all very smart. They give you lots of wisdom. But this is not connected wisdom. This is not grounded in life. So what
Right.
you said, your answer was actually, I read this author and it touched something in me, a chord in me that then I could speak from.
Yeah.
So you're speaking not from knowledge, but from experience.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
This connection is a hard thing to get to.
Right. And something resonated with you. So you reread À la recherche du temps perdu.
All of it. Several
All of it.
I never even, look, I think I got a 93 on the paper. I didn't even read the whole thing.
Oh, God. But yeah.
Well, there's always
That's
time.
okay. That happens. And there is always time. And I will tell you, Proust is the one person I can name where the book absolutely gets better the older you get.
Really?
Yeah. Almost every time I teach.
Did you read it in French?
Yeah. Yeah. But and you could read it in French, but
I
you could
wonder
read
if
it
I
in English. The translations are good if you're, if you find one of those more easily. But I would say, and Uli's maybe heard me say this, that every time I teach Proust, we have a 13-week academic seminar. There are 7 volumes of Proust. They're all kind of long. It's really hard to get all the whole thing in one semester. And the only people I think who always do are the retired people who are auditing my class.
So-
Because they have the time and also they have the wisdom to understand.
And they've practiced.
And they've practiced.
So my brother and another friend of mine, Kevin, who also teaches, said, is this your experience that students don't read as much as they used to?
Yeah. For me, absolutely.
I think
yes.
we all have a harder time reading. I have a harder time.
Oh, for
reading
sure I
because
do.
That little phone keeps
For
on
sure I do.
calling
Yeah.
me while it
Right.
doesn't even have any interesting thing to say to me.
Yes.
Keeps on.
It's Sophia bugging me again.
Leave me alone. That's
good.
something he wants to be said to him. But yeah, it's hard for me. Yeah, it's hard to make the choice of the phone over Proust once you see how great that writer is. But I think you're right. I think your brother and your friend are right. I think that attention spans have gotten shorter for
Yeah.
everyone. Students that we have today, with all due respect to the undergraduate in the room,
Right.
Christina, students don't grow up the way that we did,
Yeah.
where your parents would probably sit you down with a nice long book.
Or I saw my parents reading.
Yeah.
Well, my kids don't see me reading.
But now,
The truth comes
thanks
out.
to technology, we can listen to Sophia Chang's
Exactly.
book.
Yes.
So there's an audiobook. So there's that.
Okay, now this takes us so far back from reading and Proust and these meaty questions. And even not knowing you at all, Sophia, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but what do you dislike about your appearance? What do you most dislike about your appearance?
Nothing. I mean, yes, I could sit here and say to you, oh, I have these wrinkles and I've got these age spots and there are certain things that I'm noticing, but I don't dislike it.
Yeah.
So I could certainly give you an inventory of the things that I think are flaws, but I also don't call them flaws.
Right.
Which living person do you most despise?
Donald Trump.
Okay.
Preach. Yeah. What is the quality you most like in a man? And Uli and I feel a little awkward about the gendering of these questions, but they're as they were written in the 1880s. So
I guess what I'd ask you then is, do you mean in a man as a partner or in a man period?
I think in a man period.
I think
in a man
yeah.
period.
I mean, your choice, but my feeling is
What's the quality that I most like?
Yeah,
Yes.
appreciate.
Honesty. And this kind of goes to Uli's point. This is not just about, promise you won't ever lie to me, but this is also about honesty about yourself, honesty with yourself. I believe deeply in self-interrogation, self-examination, self-criticism, self-renewal, self-love, self-care, self-actualization. I think all of those things are deeply tied, but you can't really do those in a robust and profound fashion unless you are honest with yourself. And yes, and of course, to be honest with others as well. And I would say the same thing for women.
What is the quality you most like in a woman? Same for a woman.
Yeah.
Okay. Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Obviously.
Obviously.
What?
How do you say that in German?
Probably
Natürlich.
Natürlich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good one.
Yeah.
Oh, you know your German.
Yeah. We knew more was going to come out. Yeah, and évidemment, which gets mistranslated
Évidemment,
as
right.
evidently.
Right.
False friend. What or who is the greatest love of your life?
My children are the greatest love of my life. But in terms of romance, I can't put a superlative on it because they were different, but Yanming, with whom Uli trained, was the great love of my life because we had children together, and he also taught me the greatest spiritual lessons of my life and helped me turn my body into a temple. And more recently, I talk about him in my memoir, somebody named William, who was in some ways just the polar opposite of Yanming, and we all tend to do this, I think, who was just so attentive. When I was with the father of my children, it was all about him, and that was me. I chose to do that. Nobody held a gun to my head. And being with this guy, William, was very, very different because he was so focused on me and so attentive. And the sex was incredible.
You know, it's nice when I listen to your memoir. They are like characters in a play because I know some of them, but other ones I don't. But actually, William is someone I really would want to meet.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's such a kind of giving and supportive person. Really interesting, but it's kind of nice you draw him as a character, and I have no idea who that is. So
he actually called me last week, and he said he listened to my memoir, and I don't know, like a day, and he just said, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy. And it's really amazing, Uli. Like, I've never been friends with my exes. I've never done that. And he and I, actually, I would say we're less friends than we are lovers, but I didn't know that I would emotionally ever be mature enough to get to this place. And it's awesome.
When and where were you happiest?
Same answer as before. Here.
Here now.
Yeah, here now. I just think to do that thing, to pose that question to yourself is, it's attachment to a nostalgia, and I talk about this as well in my memoir. Like, why? For me, I would question the question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not you, obviously. Question the question.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Why would we put ourselves through the exercise? Because the implication, of course, is that it's not now.
Right.
So let me hearken back to this time, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I was 17 and I was the head cheerleader. You know, like, no.
Then that's also so sad.
Right. Because it is always about something in the à la recherche du temps perdu.
Voilà. Yeah.
Right? C'est perdu, mais c'est pas perdu. C'est maintenant. C'est ici.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny, my brother and I used to cringe because my father repeatedly told us that the happiest time of his life was the summer of 1957.
Before the children were born?
Before we were born. And before he met my mom. So we would look around the dining room table and think, God, all of us represent a serious downgrade from when Dad had a convertible and he was in high school.
He's like, albatross.
Totally. Oh, for the good old days of 1957.
Exactly.
I didn't have to deal with these people.
This yearning,
I know.
right?
I know.
But it's also a very when was this written?
1880s.
Is that the it's a little bit after the romantics, right? It's post-romantic, but it's kind of that it makes sense for the time, don't you think?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I think so. And I think for someone like Proust, who did have that model of thinking, one of his great kind of relatively pithy lines for Proust is the only real paradises are the ones we have lost. And he profoundly believes that, but my feeling is that you profoundly don't. And the wiser of the two positions, I think, is not believing that.
Well,
believing you can have it now.
Right. Well, he's not a Buddhist,
He's
right?
not a
I mean,
Buddhist. No.
what I'm talking about is a very central tenet in Buddhism.
Well, he's an artist, and the strange thing is, and he writes a 3,200-page novel to allow us to hold on to happiness.
Right.
While he's searching and putting us on this kind of wild goose chase.
Right.
But art is an effort to hold on to time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To preserve it, which
Yeah.
only art can possibly maybe come close to besides being a
Right.
Buddhist.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and with Buddhism, you're not holding on to time, you're letting it go. Right?
Absolutely.
You're letting it go. all the time.
Non-attachment.
Yeah.
Non-attachment. Absolutely.
Which talent, Uli and I have talked about this question and how it's, again, sort of somewhat strangely phrased. Presumably, which talent that you do not have would you most like to have?
I don't know. I don't care.
Have you ever dreamed of playing the oboe?
Right,
or-
like, would it be great to be an amazing downhill skier or fencer? I don't know. Would it be great to be an amazing litigator? I mean,
litigation hasn't yet come up.
or
as a talent.
a phenomenal chef. I mean, that list is endless to me. But I think, again, what's more important is that I never think that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I never think about hypotheticals in terms of, wouldn't my life be, if I was taller, if I was thinner, if I was white, if I was blonde, if I was young, if my tits were bigger, if my hair was longer, if I was richer, if I was fit, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? And I think that we are socialized to think that way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I have an issue with the problem. So, literally, I could sit here and list a myriad things that I would be great to be talented at.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get you the next question, which, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
My impatience. I think I would wish I was more patient.
I thought you were going to say that based on the book.
Yeah.
You talk about that, how patience wasn't the one thing.
Yeah, and also because, Uli, I also say talk about in my memoir that philosophically, and I think this is also tied to being Buddhist, I do not live with regret, but my only regrets is when I was a shitty mother. And that is almost always from a lack of patience.
Losing patience, yeah. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My children.
Nice. Who are awesome.
Thank you.
Lucky children. They're not traumatized by you telling them that your life was much better before they existed.
Oh, well.
I need this woman as my life coach. If he were to die and come back as another person or a thing, who or what would that be?
Me. I come back and do it all over again, and I would probably change things, like try to be more patient, but again, I just don't think in those terms. So, and again, that doesn't mean that I think that I'm the greatest person in the world or that I'm anything so extraordinary. I just know that I love me, and I love my life. And I've worked so hard to be here. And as a Buddhist, I believe that I will be reincarnated. And que sera, sera. It's out of my hands.
Where would you most like to live?
Where I live now.
Okay.
This is a very un-Buddhist questionnaire overall, I think, right?
Oh, I don't know. Actually, I don't know a thing about Buddhism, but I don't think that Buddhists don't know these questions. They actually spend quite a lot of time to think through these questions. I think
Uli, you know plenty about Buddhism.
Well, I try.
Of course you
I
do.
train every day.
I don't. Yeah,
I
don't.
train every day.
I'm not an expert.
I
in
always
Buddhism.
feel like I'm still in the beginner class.
Of course we are. Of course we are. I mean, but I'm no expert in
That's
Buddhism.
what I mean. Actually, I think the beauty about Buddhism is, I think that they think about these questions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
And
they're
also-
quite aware that those questions are the ones
And
that
that's
get in the way.
practice. That's what the practice is for, to address
Right.
it.
And for me, my study of Buddhism was through training in
Right.
Kung Fu. It wasn't reading text. I can't quote things for you. Like I can't the 8 noble truths, all that stuff. I can't name all that. I just know that I lived and breathed and had children with and was partnered with and trained with a Chan Buddhist master. So what I gathered from that is how I live my life. And in so doing, I call myself a Buddhist. But, if you sit me down to write a test, I'd fail, if there's such a thing.
I remember you saying to me very early on when I started training, and you said, it's not the kind of temple where you go up, meditate on a silk pillow,
Right.
and then you walk downstairs and start screaming at the guy at the deli.
I
And I'm like, why is that? That's not the idea of Buddhism we have here. Actually, you are supposed to be training, and you're supposed to be in this all
All
day
the
long
time.
and
Right.
all night long
All
and
the
with
time.
everybody. But it's not, I did my 1 hour of
Yeah.
training, and now I'm going to be an asshole again. He said
Right.
that. You said that is not the point of this temple, and
Right.
I didn't understand it for a lot.
But you
Oh, now I know.
That's
Oh,
really
yeah.
and
funny
also Uli, knowing you and watching you train, you've adopted it. You have. And we don't do it in any overt way. And I think that was the genius of Yan Ming, and is the genius of Yan Ming, is that he's so led by example. I mean, he literally, in 12 years, never complained. I literally, and you know this, and
Oh,
you
I know.
believe it. Ever. I would fetch about the rain. Oh my God, it's raining. And he would always say, Sophia, the trees and the flowers need the rain so they're happy. And he meant it. And I mean, I was with him 24/7.
Wow.
It's not like it was a facade. This is essentially, constitutionally, who he is. And I just think that's so amazing.
Oh my God, yeah. What is your most treasured possession?
My most treasured possession would be, I have to think about that. What's the thing that I would really, really be crushed if I lost? Probably photos. Probably childhood photos and photos of my parents.
What do you regard as the lowest depth of misery?
Not being present. Not knowing how to live right here, right now. Either always being burdened by the past, like your albatross, or always being stressed about the future. And that doesn't mean that you're not informed by your past, or you don't ruminate and you don't, think about, oh, remember this and remember that, or that you don't plan for the future. Of course we do. We have children. But the notion that you don't truly know how to be present means that you are not truly living, right? If you're always back there or up there, you're never right here. Quelle misère.
Yeah.
The question is, what is your favorite occupation? We think it means, what would be your favorite occupation if you could
right?
choose right now?
What I'm doing, writing, and it'll change.
What is your most marked characteristic? And we think that means, what do you think they perceive first about you?
Confidence.
Confidence. I'm the baddest bitch in the room.
Right. I'm not seeing the confidence in that title. It should have been a little more.
Wait a minute.
Put yourself
We have
forward
to
a little more.
deconstruct it. Let's put it on a whiteboard and just go through it word by word.
Not quite lean in. It's a little more than that.
Yeah. Again, you should have pushed harder for something that really showcased.
Yeah, it's a
your
little
sense of
trepidatious.
self. I know. I'm sorry about that. Hate to have to be the one to tell you after it's already out. And Sophia, I think you've already answered this question, but it's come back as one of the questions that we ask in this sequence. What do you most value in your friends?
Honesty. And again, there are two sides to the honesty coin. So to deconstruct honesty in terms of a friendship, Schadenfreude. There's another German word.
Again with the German.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's human that we experience Schadenfreude, right? But if you can be honest about your love, and my one of my mentors, Sophia Chang, God rest her soul, used to say to me, go to the love, Soph, go to the love. So let's say Uli has some accomplishment and I'm experiencing ein bisschen Schadenfreude, right? But when I go to the love and I'm honestly thinking about how much I love Uli, I am so happy for him. And by the same token, if I see Uli fuck up, I love him enough that I'll pull him aside and I'll say, Uli, you know what? I know you thought you were making just a casual joke there, but I think you really hurt her feelings, right? So I have friends like that, again, my motherfucking village, that will not hold back, They'll just be unabashedly joyous for my success. And they are honestly there when I'm hurting or I'm vulnerable or I feel betrayed or disappointed. And then again, they will gently admonish me with honesty. And all of that takes love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. That's nice. Who are your favorite writers, if you have any?
Gosh, I have so many. I mean, off the top of my head, I would say Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think he's astonishing. Joan Morgan, Casey Lehman. We all grew up on hip hop. We're all of the same generation. And so there's a commonality of experience, a generational commonality there. And the richness of their prose is astonishing. And then I would say GZA from Wu Tang, all the guys in Wu Tang. And then going back, my favorite novel is Dattaji.
Oh.
I think I've read it 5 times. Wow. I read my father, God rest his soul, the final paragraph in that as he was dying. he says, les cris de haine. He says something to, he's just been visited, Meursault has just been visited by the priest. And then he yells at him and tells him to get out, I think. And then he says something like, je m'ouvrais à l'indifférence bénin de l'univers, or something like that, like I opened myself to the benign indifference of the universe. And he said, et je découvrais, or je comprenais pourquoi tout à la fin de sa vie, ma mère retrouvait l'amour. Because remember, Meursault was disgusted by the notion of his mother à l'asile, si près de la mort, à l'asile, si près de la mort, so close to death that she found love again. And then he realizes in this moment when he is about to be executed, of course you wanted to find love. Et personne n'avait le droit de juger. Judgment again. Right?
Yeah.
So that is, I love that. And I also really loved The Alchemist. There's a passage in The Alchemist that I also read to my father as he was dying. And there's this really beautiful passage where they're now on the journey. He's with the alchemist going across the desert. And he says to him, is he traveling with an alchemist? Is that his traveling companion?
That's how I remember it.
Right, and he says, and the alchemist says to the young boy, because remember, the young boy is in love with the girl. And he says something like, the boy's like, how will I know when my heart is ready? And then the alchemist says, always go in search of what your heart is yearning for, because the search itself brings you closer to God, and not going on the search. Alors ça, c'est l'enfer, right? That is the pain, and I feel that so deeply. So I said this in an interview recently. I never told my kids to be perfect or even strive for perfection. Fuck perfection. I don't really care about your grades. I care that you are good, kind, just, empathetic people. Right? And I don't care about money, fame, success, any of those things by anybody else's barometers. What I care about is that I tried. And so what does failure mean to me? Failure means that I didn't try. The result, right? Because the result is beyond my control. Right. So I write this memoir, and I wrote the shit out of it, and I poured my heart and soul into that memoir. And if 2 people buy it, 2 people buy it. But I wrote it.
Yeah.
Right? And I got it out. And so that is an amazing accomplishment for me, and I'm so delighted. I cannot be attached to the outcome.
Right.
Yeah, it's that c'est que j'ai essayé. It's that I tried.
And that you, to go back to your quote from The Alchemist, that you put your heart into it. That's what. This is one of the things. My husband is an economist and sort of thinks very rationally often. And when I was writing this big book about Proust that came out last summer, he would say to me very gently from time to time, you're working so hard on this, but you shouldn't maybe necessarily expect that 1 million people will read it. And I could see that he was worried that I was.
He was trying to manage your expectations, right?
But what I always said to him is, if I wanted to be read by 1 million people, I wouldn't have been writing that.
You would write like Danielle Steele,
book.
right?
Yeah.
And God bless her.
And God bless her, because she's doing what she loves.
Absolutely.
But I could only write the book that I was writing, and I'd love it if 1 million people ever bought it. They never will, and I wasn't writing it deliberately to alienate 1 million people, but although that may have happened. But yeah, the idea that it was the book I needed to write, and so no matter what happened to it after it was out in the world,
exactly,
I couldn't be happier because it was what I wanted to do.
Exactly, and we the lucky few.
Yeah, well, that too.
I mean, imagine that we are living and healthy, and we have clothing and shelter and bountiful food and clean water, doing what we love.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that number? Is it 1 in 10 million that can say that on this planet? And it's such a profound privilege. And, pursue your passion. Tell your story. Whatever that means. I did it in a literal fashion. But writing about Proust is telling your story. Writing about Rilke is telling your story, right? 100%. All of these ways, being a sculptor or doing even being a lawyer, like my ex-sister-in-law, Carrie Goldberg, she's an attorney. She is telling her story. And the fact that we are given that gift to be able to do what we love and that we are passionate about is something that we should never underestimate.
That's right. Who is your hero of fiction, television, or film? We think that this is basically just a question about fictional characters who have been meaningful or important to you.
I don't know. Well, I would say Milceau because of that passage.
From The Stranger.
Again, The Alchemist. I also really loved The Grand Inquisitor in The Brothers Karamazov.
Nice.
I thought that passage was incredible, but that's also tied to my amazing professor, Ed Hundert, who taught that. There's no way I would have connected to Dostoevsky the way that I did, and that passage in particular, if he hadn't taught it that way. I really love Emma Thompson's character in Love Actually.
Oh.
The betrayal.
It's so...
It is so
it breaks your heart every time.
devastating.
Yeah.
And when you see her open the CD box and she thinks it's the jewelry,
God.
and then she runs up to the room and you see her just clutch her stomach and bend over and cry silently. I mean, I've had those moments where you're sucker punched, but you're the mother and it's Christmas.
Right.
So you hold it together because you fucking have to. Right? And I just thought that and also just because Emma Thompson is such a sublime actor, I just thought that was so, that really resonated with me. Just her courage and her grit and like, I'm a fucking mother and I'm keeping it together for my family.
That's great. I love that character too. And it just, I almost can't watch the film because I'm waiting for that moment, and yet you're right, it's so
but it's this
beautiful,
bittersweet
too.
thing, right?
Yeah.
You want to see it because the depiction, because the acting is so sublime, and yet it's so devastating.
So painful. Oh
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Which historical figure do you most identify with?
I don't know. I don't know. That sounds I can't think of anybody that I would say because it would all sound self-aggrandizing. Like what am I? I identify with Gandhi. Like what am I going to say? Like
He's come up
Cleopatra,
before.
yeah.
Cleopatra.
Yeah, I don't think I could comfortably answer that. Number one, I don't think I know enough about history. Because I'm really shitty at history. But number two, I would not feel comfortable answering that question, and I don't have an answer.
Like the way psychics always tell you that you were in a past life. It's never like one of the minions who was building the pyramids. You're always like a pharaoh.
Yeah, I was the one letting people be crushed by the fucking the concrete blocks. Right. I want to be that person.
In that case, your karma, really, you've got something to answer for karmically, I suppose.
Exactly.
Who are your heroes in real life?
My mother. My father, God rest his soul. My brother, my kids. I mean, my children are... I always said that I wanted to raise benevolent leaders. And I think I've done that really well. This woman recently said to me, my girlfriend, Kimmy Yam, she works at... she used to run HuffPost Asian Voices. And so she's also... the Asian daughter of immigrants. And she said, Sophia, you're one of the only people that I've ever heard say that you're proud of your children because they're good people. Because most people, my kid got into this school, my kid got these grades, my kid's the top of the soccer. I don't give a shit about that. I don't. My legacy, my greatest contribution to the world will be my children. Mm-hmm. And that's all that matters to me.
But it's interesting when you say you don't care that he or she is the top of the soccer team, and then Yan Ming, their father, raised them to train as hard as they can with incredible discipline and sacrifice. And it is very, very painful in order not to fight.
In order not
in order not to fight.
precisely.
So you're a
Yeah.
warrior
Right.
and you don't fight because
Right.
you see the aggression and you don't it
Right.
doesn't lead anywhere. So you train
Yeah.
and he can split
Yes.
a log and a cinder block into
Yes.
pieces with
Yes.
his hand.
Yes.
And he doesn't fight.
Yeah.
And in some ways to raise your kids to say, I want you to achieve everything you can achieve, but the measure is not going to be that this
Right.
team, this sport,
Absolutely.
this club is going to tell you that
Right.
you're good.
The measure is going to be, look, when I'm sitting across from God, Buddha, Allah, however you want to name her, she will not ask me, how much money did you make for that company? How much money did you make for yourself? How big was your house? She will ask me, how well did you raise your children and how many people did you help along the way? It's all that matters. And I believe that I have raised my children to think that the greatest thing they could do is be in service of others. And that takes a myriad that could manifestations, right?
It's really moving. What are your favorite names?
Names.
Yeah, favorite names.
You know, a name that I always think about that is so beautiful in French but so ugly in English is Hermione.
You're so right. Yeah, Hermione doesn't.
It
have
doesn't.
That. Yeah, Hermione. You're right.
Hermione
Well,
is
we do
so
love
beautiful.
Hermione from Harry Potter, though. We do.
Oh, that's
That
true.
kind
You-
of did make it
I
pretty
just
popular.
want you to know that Uli's house was the Harry Potter house, man. Every one of Rafi's birthdays for like
right.
3 years,
All
it
Harry
was
Potter
all.
all the
Oh,
time.
you kidding? All Harry, like everything, all of that. Yes.
So
I
Hermione
like-
is a kind of, she's been anglicized and
Yeah.
beatified.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Hermione, I agree with you. I think it's
Hermione.
prettier.
It's
in
so
French.
pretty in French. I love my name. I love Sophia because it means wisdom. And when I was growing up, it was not a popular name at all. And I was named, my father was a mathematician, and he named me after a Polish mathematician. I love my children's names. You know, I think that Asian names, I like them more because they can have so much more depth and so much more meaning. Because, you know, you choose characters, right? So I think I'm right in this. Chinese and Korean, and I don't know about Japanese names, but they have two characters, so you can put two characters together. So my son is Jin Long, right? Jin means golden and Long means dragon. My daughter is Jian Hong, and that means Jian is a straight sword, and Hong is a homonym. It means red. It's red, but it actually is a homonym for rainbow or fire. And so the meaning of her name is straight sword that cuts through fire, because when I was pregnant with her, unbeknownst to me, I did not know I was pregnant with her. I was beat up by the police at the Beijing airport. And so I think that there's so much more depth to these names. And I met this Sikh gentleman recently at the gym, and I said, "What's your name?" And he said, AC. And I said, "What's your name?" I said, "Your parents did not name you AC. What's your name?"
Right.
And he said, "It's Amardeep." And I said, "What does it mean?" And it's this fucking like, well, I think his last name is Singh, right? But he said my full name means something like a lion, like charging across plains of fire. You know, something like that. And I said,
Not AC.
right. And I said, so I said, go home and I want you to call your mother and tell her that you met a woman at the gym today who insists that you call yourself by your name.
Good.
And he
Wow.
did. And he said, I was like, did you tell your mom? And he was like, yeah, my mom loved it.
Of course she did, but rightly so. Oh my, that is amazing.
Sophia, what is it that you most dislike?
Period.
Yeah, anything.
Hatred. And, hatred manifests in so many ways. Hatred manifests in children in cages. Hatred manifests in people not wanting you to, be as great as you want to be. There's so many big and small ways hatred manifests in being called a chink or a Jap or a gook. Hatred manifests in erasure. It's an ugly phenomenon, and it's like water because it's powerful and it can go anywhere and it can creep under any door and get through any crack and any crevice, and we have to work so actively to combat it.
You've already told us that you have no regrets, but what is your greatest regret?
When I was shitty to my kids.
Okay, fair enough.
When
Thank you.
Oh, the Vespa.
Oh.
You have a little moment with
Yeah,
Jinlong
there
and a
was
little silver Vespa.
my
Do you wanna
son,
recount
like
for
so many kids,
our listeners?
used to was Raffi into cars? He wasn't
Yeah, he wasn't as much.
as
into
much,
cars.
right? But
He was mostly into his soccer balls.
yes, the soccer. But lots of
Potter.
little boys really get into toys and into toy cars and trucks and stuff. Like they're obsessed when they're around 2 or 3, and they memorize all of them. And he had, he kind of had every little Matchbox car and everything. And one of my ex's students came back from Italy, and she brought him this little silver Vespa. And we were like, oh, my God, that's amazing, because you couldn't get those here. Right. And one night, being impatient in a fit of rage, he wouldn't go to sleep. I just hurled that Vespa across the room, and it just and it broke irreparably. And I thought, oh, there's one for the couch. So thank you, Uli.
We may get you another little silver Vespa, and I'll send it to Jinlong in college.
Please.
You may remember. He'll be like, well, Mom, what are you talking about? I don't remember anything.
Exactly. And then that'll trigger him. He'll be like,
He's in a fetal position under the bed and he won't come out. What's going on?
How would you like to die?
surrounded by friends and family.
What is your motto?
Humility and gratitude.
And we have 2 more questions, actually. Carrie's going to ask you the first one, which we add to this questionnaire.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because we always love the people who come on this podcast, we're particularly curious to know who they, and so in this case, whom you would most want to hear answer these questions on this podcast.
I'd love to hear Casey Lehman answer these questions. Have you read his memoir?
Great idea. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You recommended it on Facebook. That's why I got it.
I did. I read 5 pages, and this is only the intro. And I was like, I'm fucking throwing my computer out the window. I'm never writing again.
Right. Hate that.
It's devastating.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
And the second question, since we have Christina in the room here, so she's a student, is there anything like advice you would give to a young person?
Oh, God, there's so much advice I give to a young person, particularly a young woman. I think the top advice I would give to you is educate yourself about fertility. I'm not telling you to have children. I'm telling you to educate, if it is something you think about, to educate yourself. We are in the prime of our fertility at 22, which is when you'll graduate. It starts to decline a little bit steadily, and at 27, it starts to decline more quickly, and then at 35, the drop-off is precipitous. And I tell you this because I have so many friends who, when they turned 40, had a great career and had lots of fun and traveled the world and everything, and they looked at their watch and they said, oh, fuck, I'm 40. And I don't know if I remember, somebody once told me, actually, somebody from NYU told her the statistic, I think, that 75% of our eggs are damaged by the time we're 40. And so if you think about the things that you want to achieve, you will not have achieved them by 35. You won't, right? And the sacrifice of a mother is far greater than that of a father. So, again, this is not me urging people to have children. The planet cannot sustain everybody having children, but I think that fertility is a conspiracy of silence. When I do public speaking and I ask the women in the room, how many of you were told how not to get pregnant? Everybody shoots up their hand. And the second question is, how many of you were taught about your fertility? 1 in 10, if not 20. Mm-hmm. Were you taught? Did anybody?
Certainly not. No, and then it's the shocking thing when you're in your mid-30s and someone is like, by the way.
Yeah, but, did you how the fuck, we didn't even talk about it amongst ourselves.
No, at least now I think.
Yes, it's cracking open, but it's really sad for many, many, many of my friends that they've had these otherwise stellar lives, and again, only for the ones that wanted to have children, that are now looking like, I have a friend who recommends that women start freezing their eggs at 27. Because the older you get, obviously, the less viable your ovarian reserve is. Right. 27? Shit, I moved to New York. 22. 27, I got my first industry job. You think I was thinking about having children? It couldn't have been further from my mind.
Yeah, sure.
It couldn't have been. That's one thing. The other thing I would recommend is learn how to negotiate. Because women, I think, I don't know about your generation, but certainly my generation, we were not taught to talk about money. We were not taught to value ourselves. We were sure as shit not taught to how to negotiate and learn how to read a contract. Because if you are ambitious, and I assume that you are, you're at NYU, you will continue to ascend. And as you ascend, depending on what discipline you're in, you will be presented with a contract. And you want to know how to read that contract. I'm not saying to negotiate it yourself, but if you know how to read that contract, you will be so much more empowered. And then you can have a conversation with your attorney about what it is that you want.
Well,
Learn how to negotiate.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Sophia, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you so
us
much
today.
for having me.
This was so great. We loved talking to you.